Welcome back. This is Toyota Fanatic 81, and today I'm painting and installing fender flares on my 2014 Toyota Tundra. Before I throw them on the truck, I'm going to paint match the fender flares. So I have primer, I have base coat, metallic gray, and I got acrylic clear coat. And of course, the fender flares come with all the hardware needed to install them. I'm ready to go. The first thing to do is clean them off. You want to make sure there's no dust or dirt on them. Now we can start priming the fender flares. Keep in mind that you don't have to completely cover the fender flare with the first coat of primer. You should get most of it, but you use the second coat of primer to finish the job. I left about 15 to 20 minutes of time between both coats of primer, and afterward I left the primer for about an hour to dry before adding the base paint. Now it's time for the base coat. In the case of my truck, magnetic gray. As with the primer, the first coat of base paint won't completely cover the fender flare. You want to cover most of it, but you use the second coat of base paint to finish the job. Just like with the primer, I put 15 to 20 minutes between the first coat and the second coat of base paint. When I was done the second coat of base paint, I let it dry for an hour before adding the acrylic clear coat. Now, the acrylic coat took the longest because I applied 4 coats to the fender flares, and I put 15 minutes in between each coat. Now, the reason I did that many layers is because I want these fender flares, or the paint on the fender flares, to stand up to the elements. Wind, rain, water, dust. I still want them to look good despite the elements. The clear coat was left to dry until the next day, and now they look really good and they're ready to go in the truck. These Tyger fender flares come with everything you need to install them and dress them up. It's a good idea to clean the upper ridge of the fender flare before you put on the rubber gasket that comes with the kit. Now, this gasket is a little tricky to apply, but luckily Tyger gives you a little tool to help put it on. In this case, I wanted to use my fingers. I wanted a bit more control, so I'm not using the tool, but it's there in case I need it. In case you're wondering why there's a rubber gasket included with this kit, it's to keep the fender flare from scratching the paint on your truck. It's also there to keep water and dust from getting in underneath the fender flare. And here's where we dress up the fender flares. These little bolts don't serve any purpose or have any real function. They're just there to make the fender flares look better. The nice thing about this kit from Tyger Auto is that they do supply the hex bit that you would need to put on the bolts. In this case, I'm using my own, but they really thought of everything with this kit. I chose to start on the front driver's side fender, and there's a few things that I'll have to do before I can install the fender flare. First, I have to remove a few of the bolts that are holding the fender liner in. Next, I have to detach the mud flap at the back of the fender. This bracket serves as an extra attachment point for the fender flare. The bracket lines up with holes that are already in the fender, so all I have to do is grab a couple of bolts from the kit and secure it to the fender. Now it's time to actually get the fender onto the truck. The easiest way to do this is to insert a bolt in the bottom front and the bottom back of the fender flare. This will help hold it in place so that you can screw in the rest of the bolts. As soon as I've got the bolts in by hand, I can secure them with the socket wrench. Of course, I'm just going to do this hand tight because I don't want to strip any threads. That's fender flare number 1. Man, that looks good. For the driver's side rear fender, the job is basically the same. Take out the bolts and take off the mud flap. The only difference will be that there's no bracket needed for the rear fender. The fender flare will simply line up with holes that are already in the fender. Just like the front, once you've threaded the bolts in by hand, use the socket wrench to tighten them. Remember, just hand tight. Don't strip any threads. And that's it. The driver's side is done. It's actually a fairly quick job. Now, before we install the passenger side fender flares, let's do a quick comparison. We still have lots of wheel poke on the passenger side, and a little bit less on the driver's side. I'm glad that the fender flares don't completely get rid of the wheel poke. I like the wheel poke look, but these fender flares will definitely help keep my truck cleaner, and they add a beefy, more muscular look to the truck. Yep, the process is exactly the same on the passenger side. Of course, every install video has to have a good before and after shot. Now remember, I liked the wheel poke look. I'm not changing it because of the look. I just think these fender flares add they add a nice touch to the truck. And of course, they help keep the truck a bit cleaner. Once again, I'd like to thank you for coming to the channel and watching this video. I know you're busy, you got lots of stuff to do, and you're here watching this video, and I'm super grateful for that. If you liked this video and you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And if you know anyone else that's looking to put fender flares on their 2014 to 2021 Toyota Tundra, please share this video with them. I'm sure they'll find it useful. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you can get notified when I throw up another modification video. And while you're here, please check out all the other mod videos that I've done with the Tundra and with the 4Runner. And that's a wrap. I'll catch you on the next modification video.